as it were, trying to keep a bunch of 19-year-olds awake for 75 minutes.
Right.
But
Hey,
get
hey,
good
Doug,
reviews. So
let me ask, oh, hey, what's up, Kerp? Let me ask my icebreaker question. Wait, also, sorry, where are you getting reviews on?
I get like student feedback at the end of every semester. On like what they thought of the course, but also what they thought of me as an instructor in the course.
Nice. Is that like, wasn't there like a Rate My Professor site? That's what I was thinking about. Does that still exist?
Yeah, sort of. That doesn't do so much, but there's internal. I mean, they don't use it as much as they used to, the students. Partially because the schools looked at that and they said, "Oh, we should move all of this feedback shit online," and they did, and so now the students engage over there. It's not published in the same way. I don't know. I haven't looked myself up on Rate My Professor.
Yeah, let's send you a bunch of reviews.
But they seem to like me, so. There's another one called Course Forum that people have talked about before. That one there, everybody reports their grades and then it calculates the GPA. So students look on there to see if your class is easy or not.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Which is funny, but.
Well, so let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing right now. It's like,
yeah,
we set up these, we're trying to schedule a bunch of these, what we're calling fireside chats, notes from the edge or something like that. It's kind of funny every time I say it out loud, but basically we're trying to talk to members and other people to understand how they're using AI in their daily work, if they're a dev or a designer, or if they're doing something outside, like being a professor. We're not only trying to target members, we're trying to kind of expand out even a little more and find other people that might be using AI in different interesting ways. Like it could be as much as just like using a chat to ask questions, or maybe it gets as deep as like creating like a personal content management system and context storage and memory, you know. But what we found is that everyone's doing it a little different, and it's really interesting. And we didn't know, or we don't know how everyone's using things. So it's just really casual conversations, just seeing how people are doing this stuff, and really like how they're adapting, you know, with basically every field potentially being totally disrupted by this stuff.
Yeah.
As a professional, how are you like adapting to that and incorporating or banning or whatever it is? So yeah, that's basically it. So for the sake of the recording, you mind introducing yourself and just like saying what's up?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Kerp around these parts. Adam Kerpelman is my full name. Professionally these days, I am a professor at the University of Virginia's McIntyre School of Commerce, which is the undergraduate business school there. I teach information systems. I also teach entrepreneurship generally. And then my fields of study, I've learned these days, I should say, is applied AI. So I have a lot of thoughts on this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, mainly I was just playing around with all the tools because I can't help it. And they were like, yeah, you should call it this and you should write some papers and then everyone will take you seriously. I was like, great. By everyone, they mean the other professors. I think everyone else already takes me seriously. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, I guess context that, you know, everyone in this room knows, but for anyone from the cohort or whatever, also, I guess I've been hanging around long enough to say OG member of RaidGuild.
For sure.
I still not as OG as some of the rest. So every time I say that, I'm like, yeah, but I can think of 10 people. You know, it's the same as any time I say I'm an expert about something, where I'm like, yeah, but any expert also knows 20 people that know more than them, and so they're, you know, I immediately am like, but I'm not an expert. But yeah,
Okay,
I guess it's worth mentioning remaining context just for anybody that, you know, I pivoted to that job I'm also assistant director of student entrepreneurship, like for the whole university. So I'm also involved in a whole bunch of initiatives, partially between both of those worlds, to like figure out how we use AI to help students like make new companies and stuff like that, um, as well as just generally. And then uh, also, um, before that, I spent 20 years running my own businesses. The first 10 was like marketing companies. Then I did a few startups. Then I ended up in crypto land, or blockchain land, which is how I ended up in RaidGuild. And then after that was pulled in-house to do marketing for a data startup that was acquired. And that's kind of what got me the career momentum to do whatever I wanted to do next. And so I picked hanging out in academia, which has turned out to be a lot of fun because I have the flexibility to just work on whatever goofy projects I think are interesting. And as long as I frame it as research and use it to answer questions for students or other nerds, they let me keep the job. So
That's
it's pretty great.
that is great. So you were even talking about it like in your kind of relationships with your students, you're already having to like kind of adapt in some ways. I'm kind of interested in expanding on that a little more, but also even just like in the way you're doing research or the way you're building syllabus or you're engaging and in consulting, you know, like maybe those are two threads to pull on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so in terms of like sort of where it hits the student piece, the cool thing about being inside of a university right now is that everyone is really being forced to reckon with the reality of the emergence of the AI tools. Like we can't hide our head in the sand because, like, I'm at a top university. It's competitive, and the students that get in here are competitive by nature, and so they are using whatever performance enhancing substances or tools they can find. And so, they immediately adopted ChatGPT the second it worked for helping them answer questions. And like, so all of the instructors have to reckon with the reality of things like just having you write like a reflection paper, like doesn't work the way that I think about it anymore. Or the way that we used to think about it. And there's a term they've been throwing around the last like couple of months. They call it like proxy collapse, which is like forcing educators to realize that we have used like a format of assignments and things like that forever, really as a proxy for showing that the knowledge gained in the course has actually happened. And like the AI breaks the thing where it used to be too costly or whatever to cheat on things, and now it's so easy that like write a paper as a proxy for understanding of a topic has collapsed now, and we have to like reassess how we do things.
That's amazing. I love that.
Which for me has made it a great time to be in as the guy that's like, yeah, we use the agents to do it too. And so like I keep pitching that we should do exams where you just get interviewed by Claude based on a skill that I build out, that will run an interview that will assess if you learn this stuff in the course. And essentially we get to bring back oral exams, except the oral exam will be run against a bot instead of me, because my class size is 70 and I have 3 sections, sometimes 4 a semester. I can't possibly do oral exams for that many students. But agents could. So
that's really interesting, and it's almost like, because of the way that I'll use chat sometimes, it's almost like through the process of trying to learn about something or really to do something with it, I accidentally learn a lot, and so it's kind of like, like as it's asking me questions, it's like, well, no, can you teach me,
I mean, I'd say that to, students and even other like colleagues all the time, which is like part of the paradigm shift that we're not used to, is like the idea that, like I use Claude Code as the example. It's easy to think of it as an engineer and it does the engineer things, but also it's an infinitely patient tutor about the engineer things. And so like if you went to your senior engineer and constantly said, yeah, but why'd you do that? Like I want to understand the methodology and the libraries and the blah blah blahs. Your senior engineer is going to roll their eyes and be like, I'm not getting paid to teach you how to code. But like the models don't care. And so my working with Claude Code has caused me to learn all kinds of things that I a little bit knew, but now I'm better at around, database schemas and, structurally coherent ways to build an app in
Yeah.
terms of, like what should go where and what should go this way for security reasons, whatever it is.
That's incredible.
And it's a thing
and kind of cool.
that people need to learn, right? Like they need to learn that they can say, can you explain your logic behind that to me?
Wait,
Like at any
why are we
time.
doing
And
this? Like it makes
yeah,
sense
right.
to
And
do,
yeah,
when it's not just like agreeing with everything, right? And it's
right.
like,
And it's a way to force it to not agree, right?
Yeah.
Explain, for a while that was like, they used to call it chain of thought, right? Where it's like, explain your chain of thought. Like I'm talking about a thing past that, a step, which is like, once you realize you can use it to understand the thing, then to me, it's a really cool opportunity for someone like me who really learns well by doing, right? Like I don't do so great with the irony of me preparing lectures for students is like, I don't consume how to do things very well via lecture. Like, I think I'm a pretty good storyteller, so I think I put together pretty good lectures. But like, if people just lecture at me, I have to go do the thing before it sticks.
yeah.
And now, like, having models for that combines that in a way that is really, super, like, again, maybe I'm falling into the sycophancy trap, but like, I feel like I know so much more since I started working with Claude for everything in my life
Yeah, it's
than
almost
like I
you have
used to.
kind of like be able to, it's almost like a new skill. You have to like notice like that it is just telling you what you want to hear and
Yeah.
and know
Right.
how to get around that. So, well, I guess you've mentioned a couple things with your student relationships, with your lectures. What other kind of things are you using it for? Because you're building
Yeah. Well,
apps and stuff.
so the super, interesting, that's just like, it's partially just happenstance, but like, so I pivoted to a completely new profession, like right at the time that, ChatGPT like 3.5 or whatever, is working, it just started working well enough to be a thing where I was immediately like, I have no idea how to do a lesson plan. But this thing over here does. And it's a thing that even at the 3.5 level, it was really good at, because there's all kinds of public stuff already in the knowledge, like in the training data about basic ass, classroom experiences that are good at teaching students stuff. There's just endless blog posts about that kind of stuff. And so early on, it was very much me just sort of like inheriting a syllabus for a class where I know I need to cover a certain topic, but I want to find a way to do it with students that's compelling. And I could do 10 minutes of ideation with ChatGPT and get like a good 45-minute interactive experience for students in class that's way better than what I would have made up, because like I don't have the I don't have the toolkit to draw on for, hey, here's 20 different ways to do a lesson that is compelling for students. So that's a way I still use it a lot. Like syllabus planning, like it's really good with, okay, I've got 28 classes and this many topics, and how should I split this up, and blah blah blah. But yeah, also the last year I've really fallen down the rabbit hole of like, now I can build all of the, I heard somebody say it this way the other day, and I really appreciate it. I'm already the kind of person that sees the world as a series of like product shaped problems that could be solved for money. And so I have notebooks on notebooks of things that I'm just like, if I had an engineer on staff, here's the thing I would start building. so I've been able to hack at those like crazy.
That's
And then
awesome.
that started to overlap with like, so we use Canvas, which is the learning management system that like all the grades and the assignments and everything lives in. And I found out that they have an open API. It's already open source software, and our school allows for the instructors to have open API access to it. And so I'm able to generate a key and then literally talk to it can do anything in my Canvas instance. So I immediately started building a software layer that helps me run my courses way more easily and effectively, and lets me do cool stuff. And like, some of it is as simple as just managing my grades and whatever. But But then building out other cool things like a pitch tool that's, it'll waste too much time if I start pitching the thing. But I've ended up building an entire suite of things that just make my life easier, or that I was otherwise doing with like little third party tools that cost $25 a month, or that the school is paying for a site license for, or something like that. And instead of living in 10 different SaaS apps, to like be able to do polls, with my class in real time, where the results then show up on the screen. So then I can use that to facilitate a discussion. Like, I'm talking to a room full of engineer types, that's a thing that's not hard to build,
Yeah.
but like is an example of a thing that the university is probably paying $100,000 a month to have for all of its instructors at the
Right.
scale of UVA. Right? It's crazy. But like, I didn't even realize we had a version of a thing that does that. I just built my own and then later found out about the one I could have used based on our site license.
Well, yeah, and
But
definitely
like,
feel free if you have open source, if it's up on GitHub or whatever, or you have a landing
yeah,
page you want to share it in chat.
yeah, for sure. So
Well,
like that's an example, but then I've been hacking at my own things that are just like emergent problems. Like I started working on this thing I've been calling Hypercontext, which is so like I have because of my two different jobs, I have two different offices, each of which has its own computer, and then I have my computer at home. So like keeping context united across all of the different agents and chats that I'm working with
yes.
is a giant hassle. So I ended up building a thing that like it's a local client, but that syncs to the cloud, that lets me dump context at the end of any workday and then pick it back up pretty easily over it. I know this is like I know this is a problem that a lot of people are trying to solve, and that, yeah, basically.
That's cool.
But also sort of an archive tool. Like it honestly started as a thing where I was just like, I just want to store my like core documents about things like writing style and preferences, so I don't have to keep telling the agents like, or like ingesting markdown files anytime I go somewhere to like get it to write in a way that sounds like me, or to understand the context of a project or whatever.
Right.
Um,
So what
but
are you, like what tools are you mainly using? Claude Code, it sounds like, or are you using other tools or anything else like
yeah, I've been transitioning to using Claude Code, and then like, just kind of a CI/CD pipeline that I built with Claude Code. But the last year, I've mostly been using Replit.
that? Oh, right.
It's
So
got some
you were
drawbacks,
using
but it's
Replit to kind of spin up fast and hosted apps,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It's just I find it to be the most like it's a little more technical than like the lovables and the V0s and the whatevers.
Mm-hmm.
But still gives me the ease of like I can just slop up a thing, and then especially when I'm just building dumb little apps for myself, like I don't need to go crazy with this thing has to be like perfect and performant. I just need it to be on a server so I can access it from the other computer or whatever.
Yeah. So,
But also, like, there's another interesting or thing that you guys might think is interesting that happened recently, where I saw a tweet about it. Literally, it had like 3 lines in it and a screenshot, and I was immediately like, "Oh, okay, I could do this." And it's a local app that lets you plug in API keys for your LLMs, and then sets 2 agents against one another negotiating a contract. And I was like, okay, this already aligns with a bunch of the stuff I was building back in the Juris days with my legal tech and like legal engineering stuff.
mm-hmm.
And so I took all of the old code from these 3 different versions that existed across a bunch of different pivots from Juris, including the like blockchain dispute resolution layer, and then later a piece we built about documents and like document provenance and like hashing and stuff like that, and then another layer, and just kind of dumped it all in, and ended up building a new thing that, like, because I still had the old URLs, I just slapped up on the old URL, and like I don't know if I'm going to do anything with it, but the idea that I was able to take this pile of old IP and like in 45 minutes make it like live again in a new and modern way was really a mind-blowing thing to sort of experience.
His ears are perking up because he's working on a project like that right now. But let's not get off track yet. So yeah, it sounded like and this next question is about what do you still think is broken and like the pain. It sounded like context management was one of the big problems, and that gets mentioned a lot. But
Yeah,
what other
context
things?
management and context management and then memory, those
Mm-hmm.
kind of go hand in hand. Um, which like on one hand, I feel like I'm just kind of holding my breath because I think both of these probably end up getting solved because there's money in them, our hills, for the model providers. Um, but the one that I flagged when you gave me this question earlier, though, is like I'm I'm consistently aware that I am throwing the beefiest model at problems that could easily be solved by a lesser model.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know like which one to pick when. And I a little bit wish it would just pick for me, but I also know that every time they say it'll pick for you, it doesn't do that effectively.
It's not great.
So I don't know.
Model orchestration, which there are
Yeah,
some
model like
skills that
yeah,
kind of work, but yeah, not great.
yeah. I've heard of OpenRouter, haven't played with it yet.
A lot of the local AI guys are doing that in ways like
Yeah,
bolting into a hosted frontier model when they need it, but trying to do everything else locally.
right.
Um, yeah, I think that's definitely a good one. Um, all right, so then the last point is just kind of like where do you see it in the future? Like in 6 months, where do you see your profession changing? Where do you see how do you see AI changing? Like in specifically in your profession, like what's the doomer take and what's the like more optimistic take? You know?
Yeah. Well, so I can also kind of jump into that one through the lens of a question from chat from Tay about how the students are feeling about the future. um, yeah, the students are understandably anxious. Um, they, you know, the justification for the investment in university is you get a better job, right? And they are currently being told that AI is going to replace all their jobs, and so I think hopefully they feel better after they take my class or they come to office hours when I explain to them like I don't think that's right. I think right now that's a popular narrative because it speaks to the value that these like companies want you to believe is tied into their IPO, frankly. Um, which we'll see if that bears out in the next few months. Uh, but like you know, my answer broadly is I think it creates more work for like especially engineers, um, because it's going to replace a lot of the or like I heard somebody say this recently, which is like you know code generation is a task that engineers do, but like it's not actually their primary function. The primary function of an engineer is to like understand the processes and mental models and like structures and things like that an engineer understands to be able to do their job well, and then yeah they generate some code. So like you're still going to need the people that understand all those pieces, and then you're still going to need QA people to deal with quality assurance. Should not use acronyms without explaining them. um, you're still going to need quality assurance people to like
Yeah.
check this
Question answer, you
nx
mean?
amount of
Sorry.
code that's going to be like one way I say it sometimes is like I think there's going to be a shift to this idea that's more like just a title like builder, right? Which is some kind of like amalgamation of product manager and coder, and those builders are going to be empowered to just skip prototype and just build features like crazy. They're just going to be delivering these like almost finished features left and right. And somewhere, someone in every org is going to have to absorb that 10x output and make sure it's like safe to put in the app that they are legally responsible for not
Mm-hmm.
breaking, you know? Um, and so like I think jobs shift a lot, but I tend to be in the camp that believes that like all of these technologies drive the need for some version of reskilling, but in the end they result in more work than they
Mm-hmm.
undermine. Um, I think that's true in a lot of spaces. There's some interesting spaces like law firms or like marketing firms where like maybe they do get massively disrupted and that whole model changes to things that are like sort of outcome based instead of like billable hour
Yeah.
based. And I don't know what that disruption looks like exactly.
That's
Um,
interesting that you picked the two fields that you've had startups
yeah,
in.
well, they're the two where I'm comfortable making proclamations like that. And if somebody wants to say, back that up, then I can talk about the bullshit they do all day that's not worth what they charge for it.
Right.
But like, and I say law firms are interesting because they're in a very interesting, like, cornered market space where part of what they're up against is they're wildly overpriced for what they're actually doing. But then there's this other side of that that's, anyway, it's a different rabbit hole, but there's this thing of like, okay, how much of that is about absorbing liability and how much of it is actually about output? Right. Like how much of it is about just having somebody who's overseen your contracts so that you can say, well, my lawyer handled it and we're going to sue them if it didn't work out. Right. Like, um, but but yeah, kind of like my broad take on like where I think this stuff goes. I'm actually working on a book outline now
Okay.
uh, that I'm trying to sell, like tentatively called something like "Everything is Vibes" or whatever. Like I have a broader theory that like the emergence of these tools, particularly in programming, but I think across all fields, are going to cause the cost of execution and and like execution both in terms of building but also just like executing a marketing campaign to like fall to basically commodity pricing, which means all that's left is people like with taste and judgment and like access to distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And so it turns into like it used to be a significant hurdle to just like, oh, you have an idea. Well, you know, like here's a way to say it. Investors used to say like, do you have a technical co-founder? That was one of the questions they'd ask you right before they'd throw money at your project, because the first thing you're going to need to do is spend a few $100,000 possibly like building out the thing that you just pitched us, right? And we want to make sure that you have a co-founder that can look at that work and make sure it's worth the money, blah blah blah. That's not a barrier. If that's not a barrier to entry anymore, if everybody can do that part, just the execution piece, then like what's left, right? And like some of it is knowing how to execute and like what sequence to execute in. But then like some of it is just the X factor where like, why is some art like more popular than other art? Right. And it's kind of just this like 10% freak shit thing where somebody with an opinion plus a version of taste plus some version of judgment, like like, you know, says, I don't know, this is how it should be. And then the world goes, we agree, here's money. Right. So um I think
Yeah.
like what I'm excited about is that I think it expands the design space, like in a way that like we used to talk about this with blockchain a lot. Like this is one of Chris Dixon's like favorite whipping horses was like the emergence of like workable digital scarcity just create like widens the design space for what kind of cool like real stuff is doable, right? Like the stuff that we've lived, right? Like DAOs, like collectively, like RaidGuild, right? Collectively owned operations like this fit into that design space of stuff that wasn't as easily doable before we had the tools to, you know, the crypto economic tools to make it work.
Right.
Same thing here. Like in a world where I can whip up this negotiation app in 45 minutes, you know, based on some previous research, like what does that do to opening the design space for all kinds of little things where maybe they wouldn't have gotten traction before because maybe they aren't monetizable like by themselves at a sustainable level, but they might be clustered with 20 other random things that a dev shop could build also at the same time. So, you know, this should be one that's I'm sure close to the hearts of many raiders around here, right? Is like, you know, what like how many of the goofy little public good things that we've always imagined we could build that cost, you know, $20 a month would we need to cluster together to have a sustainable conglomerate of of goofy little tools, but that
Yeah.
solve problems for people at a level
I think we
like
are.
I think
Yeah,
that
we're
I think
definitely
that part
doing
of it's
stuff like
super
that.
exciting.
Is
Yeah.
well, just a quick note. We did hit the 30-minute mark, so if you had to drop or anything, but I had one
No,
more
I'm good.
question. Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
I got
So,
time.
are you using any of the like workflow automation management tasks? Things like that in Claude Code?
Yeah. Yeah. I've done a couple of, well, I've built out a few things that would sort of qualify, and one of them gets to one of my like current academic interests, which is funny because it overlaps with all the Juris stuff and the negotiation stuff. Uh, so we in my role as assistant director of entrepreneurship here, we oversee a yearly startup competition. And so over the last year, we built out a platform that uses any LLM that you want to plug in to do the first round judging, um, which I present as a workflow because it's this multi-step, process of
Uh-huh.
having multiple different judges with different personas look at like the pitch materials that are submitted by students and then score it, and then it ties together all the scores and then gives us a report, and then we use that for the first round to get like from the round of 200 down to the 20 semifinalists, and then we use the humans to do that. uh, that's downstream from a bunch of research I've done on like how good LLMs are at that sort of judgment, and it turns out really good, which is cool. um, to that end, I've also built out a Claude skill that I've used for 2 semesters now to do all of my grading for my midterms and my finals. And
That's great.
that one actually is very workflowy because I built it out so it could be used by any other instructor. And so it has an onboard process where like they have to upload their answer key, and then it asks them a bunch of questions about the answers so that it can get justification for how it should apply the grading logic to the uh, student replies. And then it runs through a process where for the first 20 tests, it checks every score against the instructor and then has the instructor explain why the instructor would have graded something differently. And it uses that to harden the rubric for the grading process. And then it'll run the rest of the tests itself after that.
All right.
Um, and it's
Perfect.
super effective. It's a workflow built up of computer vision because a lot of these tests have handwritten answers. Um, and then yeah, a bunch of like I don't, there's like 20 Python scripts in there for different things that are happening to double check and like things like that.
That's
But then
awesome.
in the end, it spits out like data, JSON files with all the grades and stuff in them that I can then put into my course tools app to have a dashboard where anytime somebody comes to office hours and wants to know how they did on their test, I can just pop up this dashboard and be like, here's what you got wrong. And it's all pretty. Um, so that's one that's, kind of in the space of
Yeah.
workflows.
Yeah, that's
I
awesome, man.
feel like I'm going to pull it, but I got a bunch of other skills. Uh, happy to keep jamming if I don't want to eat anyone else's time, but
No, I was
um,
wondering if anyone else had any questions or comments and stuff. The folks that are hanging here. Um,
I have a bunch of skills for filling out dumb forms I have to deal with every semester. Like my TA requests is a pretty standard form that exists, and the answers are almost always the same. So I have a skill that uses browser control to just fill that out for me every semester, so I don't have to deal with it. Um, I have a skill that automatically does research on and then puts into ClickUp any guests that I flag that I want to have on my podcast. I'm rebooting the engineering podcast that I used to do.
cool.
And so that one's cool because I can just drop somebody's name in and it does a research pass on like what they're up to, puts it in the description, creates a
Does
thing for it. So that's
with being with the university? Well, you said you have like access to Canvas. Do you have other like access to the research, like JSTOR kind of things, or?
um in theory I have access to stuff like that. I just haven't really poked at it. There's a lot of like the thing I really need to I'm going to start working on this next year is they have a supercluster here um in their like research compute division that I think might make it so I can run all these tools without having to pay, which would be cool.
Oh yeah.
Like it would be like running a local model, except I would have a giant GPU cluster to run it on instead.
Hell yeah.
Um, but I should call out one other one that's one other thing I've been using it for, because this is maybe different from what a lot of people here might have been using it for. But like I spent a lot of time uh, like pitching projects and putting together decks to try to, or I should say it this way, I spend a lot of time emailing people more powerful and more busy than me to try to get traction for things that I want to do around here. And so I've been using Claude Design like crazy to make decks that like they think are super impressive, but I know are super easy to make, like, an easy 5-page readable, kind of pitch thing that I can send to somebody to try to explain, whatever idea I'm working on. Um, and along with that, I have a skill that actually a buddy of mine made, but that I actually can share if anybody wants to use it, that he calls idea writer. But it's basically just a skill that, like, anytime you have an idea about a thing, it'll run an interview with you that'll go as long as you want it to help you flesh out like what's really behind that idea, how coherent it is,
Yeah.
like, how it fits in the broader ecosystem of ideas and stuff like that. I've found myself using that like crazy to flesh out things where I'm just like, hey, I'm about to talk to a guy about this thing. Let me see if this thing I'm thinking is, actually a good idea or not. And that has helped me get a bunch of. So, like I mentioned, the book outline that I'm working on. As you might imagine from listening to me talk, I've like maximum AI in terms of how I'm working on this book. And I actually have another book we're in like final edits now. That's going to be coming out about marketing and technology through the business press over here. But like, I'm still not, I don't talk about it too openly because there's still some bias over here. But like, I wrote that whole thing, Claude wrote that whole thing for me. I mean, not really. Like, I provided an outline. I've spent hundreds of hours talking to Claude and or ChatGPT to like flesh out the ideas. So it's all still my ideas and my constructs and my, frameworks. But like, it did all the drafting. Like, it did the part that would have taken me an additional 1,000 hours of sitting there and to my like analogy with the engineers and code generation, it did the text generation part, which was great because I'm bored by that part these days. But
well,
like,
actually,
I did all the idea stuff. So
here, let me stop the recording because I don't want
yeah.
to talk about something here.